Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of NB8 right here on Wood TV Plus. Phil Pinarski, once again, joined by AJ Evans to go over not just the top stories in the NBA, but also with our Detroit Pistons as well. We're going to give you a full recap of the Detroit Pistons' last week of action. We also have some top NBA storylines that we'll get to, and not to mention, we'll end our show today talking all about the All-Star game. We do have a Pistons player, and maybe you can guess who it is that will be starting in the All-Star game next month over in Los Angeles. It's going to be a great time. We'll talk about those starters that were named and the potential for any additional Pistons. But first, let's talk about some of the big storylines, AJ, and none of all being probably the most impactful injuries, at least since the regular season started, just happened. You know, we've been talking about it too, just how many injuries that have been plaguing not just players in the NBA, but stars. And a star was injured this past week in Jimmy Butler of the Golden State Warriors. He tore his ACL and is expected to miss the remainder of the regular season. I don't think I can do it justice just what Jimmy Butler not only means to the game of basketball, but specifically to those Golden State Warriors that are currently 8th in the West right now, trying to, give Steph Curry another ring while he's still in town. We're going to talk about just really the state of Golden State going forward. But first things first, this Jimmy Butler injury, another star getting injured. It's just kind of the tail of the tape really so far this season.
Yeah. I think this is the biggest blow.
Yeah.
This has got to really hurt, not only for the Warriors organization, but just the NBA as a whole.
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler has become one of the league's most polarizing players, I would say, over the last decade. He's so fun to watch, and he's a guy that you turn on the TV for when the playoffs start. And the fact that he won't be in a uniform at all this upcoming postseason it's sad to see, Phil.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's just really tough to see that it happened in the first place. Me personally, as a Marquette graduate as well, kind of, have that little bit of bond with him there. But again, this is a team that, I kind of liked sneaky out of the West. They obviously have some issues. They are currently 8th in the Western Conference right now. But, come playoff time, is there anybody that's a playoff riser, a bigger playoff riser than Jimmy Butler and even Steph Curry? I mean, you get those two guys, I think all of their stats go up as soon as postseason play starts coming around. You add in Draymond Green, who's still arguably the smartest player in the NBA, Steve Kerr, who's got that playoff experience, those championship pedigree as a head coach, and then you've got some real nice pieces. I mean, what do the Warriors kind of go towards next? And, you mentioned this being the most impactful injury. Couldn't agree more, because you look at the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum. When they found out that he was going to be out, well, kind of have pivoted that. They're still in the playoff race right now. They've had time to kind of prepare for it. You look at the Tyrese Halliburton thing. Sure, Indiana, kind of a dumpster fire right now, but they knew that going in.
Yeah,
Golden State was competing for a playoff spot and potentially a deep playoff run. And now, I mean, just as the way things stand, if they don't make any moves, I would say Golden State might not even make the play-in right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Celtics and the Pacers, they had the luxury of convenience in the fact that, your superstar player goes out, but you have the whole offseason to sort of regroup and recalibrate and decide what direction you want to go towards and what you want to do for the upcoming season and the ones after when they inevitably return. But this is a huge blow for the Warriors franchise. I mean, when you look at the stakes, Phil, this is a franchise that has been desperate to get Stephen Curry back to the finals. Yeah. They are so desperate to get a ring, and they've made a handful of moves. Some of them have been ill-advised over these last couple of seasons just to try and keep that spark alive. But the Western Conference is as competitive as it's ever been. And like you said, they're sitting at 8th in the West right now. I'm not sure I see a world where this team makes the playoffs. And if so, I'm not sure how far they go. But I think it also is a bit of karma, Phil, for this franchise, considering the fact that this team has had the opportunity to draft young talent that was supposed to be the bridge between the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson era and whatever this next era was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And those guys should be ready to step up right now. But we talked about it a little bit off air. The franchise is at odds with Jonathan Kuminga right now. I don't understand that. I've never really understood the dynamic. Both sides have seemed to be unhappy with each other for almost as long as he's been in a Warriors uniform, and I don't understand it. But on top of that, too, you have to look at where this team has failed in terms of drafting. This team took James Wiseman. That did not work out. I still am a believer that they should have taken LaMelo Ball there. I know some people would probably vehemently disagree. They'd say he doesn't fit with what they're trying to do, but I think great young players adapt to whatever their ecosystem is. And I think a player of LaMelo's caliber would have been the ultimate difference maker for a Warriors team that is looking for a guy who can simply put the ball in the basket and make plays alongside Steph Curry and when he's not in the game. I think LaMelo would have given them that, but that's all in hindsight. At the end of the day, though, this franchise has to suffer another devastating blow with Jimmy Butler being out, and I'm not sure where this franchise goes from here, Phil. I'm not sure what else there is to do.
Yeah, no, and again, I think that is kind of the biggest cause for concern is just what do you do now? And you've got a guy like Steph Curry who is the franchise. I mean, right. I think more so than maybe even LeBron with the Lakers, because you can argue that they've got Luka. Nobody's coming to see the Warriors, and this is no shade to anybody on the Warriors. Nobody is coming to see Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga, some of the other guys, Brandon Paczynski, for example. You know, the fans are not coming to see that. They want to see Steph Curry run around and hit a bunch of threes. And with this injury now, you could argue that, I mean, there's still a chance. They have said that maybe they're not thinking about trading Jimmy Butler, but there's a chance they could maybe get a big enough return and kind of stay competitive, get back in the playoffs. But Golden State doesn't make the playoffs. I mean, who's to say that Steph wants to stay in Golden State in his twilight years? Because, again, he's one of those guys that even if he hits 40, 41, 42 years old, you put him in the corner and ask him to play 15 minutes, hit a couple threes a game, he's still going to be in the NBA. What makes you think that he's going to maybe want to stick around and be that guy for Golden State instead of maybe turning it over, doing a full rebuild? I think maybe he also kind of understands the importance and what happens when he comes into a team like that and, you know, sticks around. They may not be looking to fully commit to a rebuild, or maybe he's not willing to take as dramatic of a pay cut as maybe he would need to kind of get that secondary guy in there and kind of keep Golden State afloat. So again, this injury really does change a whole lot of things, whether you think about it or not.
Yeah, and it's as far as him asking out or him wanting out, I think it's something that he and his people just have to consider at this point. Look, the NBA is a business, and I know Stephen Curry probably has a devoted loyalty to the Warriors franchise and to the Bay Area just for sticking by him. As you remember, the early part of his career, Phil, he was beset by injuries for a few seasons. And there was a point where it looked like things may never come together, and they eventually did, and it's been history from then on out. But I think you have to ask the question, if you're him or if you're his agent or anyone alongside him, like, hey, is this how you want to spend the final years of your career? Right. Because these are some terrific seasons he's put together over the last couple of years. And he's had his fair share of injuries too, but I'm not sure what else there is to do, like we've talked about. I feel like the Warriors have been playing catch up with the rest of the league. And it's been a little odd to see because for a long time they were so far ahead of everyone else. But now everyone seems to have caught up, and they're trying to figure out, hey, what's our next move? Right. What can we do to get back on top? And like I said, there have been a couple of ill-advised transactions that have not led to success. And I don't want to say that this one is, because obviously health is something you can't control, but I'm not even sure with how this team was playing through this part of the season, how far they could have gone in the postseason. I mean, because even the way we were talking about it just beforehand, you're banking on Stephen Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green being spectacular in the playoffs. Well, that's great, but if the team itself is not spectacular during the regular season, who are we to say that things are just going to automatically change when the postseason starts? Obviously, the playoffs are the playoffs, and there are some magical performances that come with that. But this is a really competitive Western Conference. Like, you don't get to be average throughout the start of the season or throughout the course of the season and then magically improve in the playoffs. So I don't know where this franchise goes from here, Phil. But I think there have been a myriad of mistakes and just wrong moves that have been made that have led to this point, this crossroads that the franchise is at now.
Well, it will be interesting to see. I mean, maybe this is the kind of situation that the Warriors needed to be in to maybe kind of address those issues that kind of just bridge that gap and kind of maybe set themselves up better for the future. Maybe knowing that this season is a wash and, maybe even kind of trying to move off Jimmy Butler. I know it may be too soon to maybe do that after all you gave up to bring him to Golden State. But again, that might be the move future down the road. If you're not going to win a championship in the next year or two, I mean, why not maybe try and take a swing to get back into that position either way? For sure.
Yeah, sometimes you got to go down to come back up.
Exactly. Well, shifting gears to another team that's kind of in the dumps right now, that being the New York Knicks. This was a team, AJ, that we both had kind of picked to be our Eastern Conference champions this year. And, they're still not out of it. They're still, one of the top teams in the East record-wise, but they have been on quite the struggle bus recently. They are currently on a 4-game losing streak, and they've lost 9 of their last 11 games. The questions across the national media have been, what is wrong with New York? I don't know how many Knicks games you've watched recently, AJ, but from my point of view, it just looks like they're walking in slow motion. I mean, it just, offensively, it just feels like they're running through the motions. Defensively, they're not communicating. They're not really, sprinting back on to get back on defense and kind of giving up easy points and everything like that. And I feel like there have been obviously some really close losses in that. You can't really fault them. They might have lost them either way. They lost to San Antonio by 2. San Antonio, they're having a great season so far. Phoenix, they've kind of bounced back recently. They only lost that game by 5, but there have been some real stinkers in this stretch as well, including a 31-point loss to your Detroit Pistons and a 17-point loss at home to the Dallas Mavericks. So again, this isn't just a kind of fluke thing. I feel like there are some real issues facing the Knicks right now.
Yeah, this is an odd part of the season, I think, for a lot of teams, Phil, because the playoffs are still a distance. They're still somewhat distant,
right?
But at the same time, the season is in full swing, and so I think a lot of teams begin to sort of just struggle during this part of the year. They seem to hit a wall, and I think that's kind of what's happened with New York. But like you said, the little things compound. They add up, and they cause a lot of issues. But there's so much talent around the league right now. There's so many teams playing at a really high level. With the exclusion of a few teams that we've talked about, anyone can come out on top any given night, it seems like. But I think New York had this same issue throughout parts of last season where everyone on the roster was healthy. Everyone seemed to be doing fine individually, but something was not clicking. And I don't want to say that this is a personnel issue in terms of the roster, but you've had 2 different coaches now, and the issues seem to still be following this team well into Mike Brown's tenure in New York. So I'm not sure where it starts. I'm sure Jalen Brunson will tell you it starts with him. He's the point guard. He's the floor general, and he's a superstar on this team. I do believe, I don't know if you saw this, Phil, he called the players-only meeting most recently. So I hope he's able to right this ship. I think he's a phenomenal player in his own right. But the crazy thing is, too, Phil, like you asked me how much I had seen. They don't look that bad when I've seen them, but it still hasn't. It just hasn't resulted in a lot of wins.
It's a weird situation.
Yeah, and so I'm not too sure where this starts. I do think some of this has to do with chemistry issues. I feel like those have kind of been plaguing this team really since OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges got here. I think there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen right now, and the team is still trying to balance 2 seasons in who gets to shine when. And I think that's made things a little bit difficult. But hey, at the end of the day, I still have this team as the favorite to come out of the East. If they're going to do it, I think this is the year to do it. So time will tell if that happens. But as of right now, things are looking kind of bleak in New York.
Yeah, no, I think on paper-wise, I'm still gonna stick with the Pistons. I'm gonna stick with the Knicks as the favorite. But the Pistons, they're kind of creeping up there a little bit. I mean, just seeing the way the 2 seasons have kind of gone so far, and even the head-to-head matchups, I've liked Detroit in all of those games right now. So that kind of begs the question, though. I mean, I think if we ended the season today, a very possible, very likely Eastern Conference Finals would be Detroit versus New York. Are you scared of New York, I guess, kind of going into the playoffs? Even if they maybe are able to right the ship a little bit. I mean, the cracks are already visible, though. I mean, are you as fearful of them, I guess I should ask? You might still be scared, but are you as scared of maybe facing them off in the playoffs?
If the season ended right now, I think my answer would be no.
Yeah.
I think it would be no. I think Detroit is playing at such a high level, particularly on defense, that I can't say I would be too fearful of New York. Like we said, along with the chemistry issues that they're having, I think the Pistons would give their best shot. But the last playoff series last season was interesting because New York prided itself on being a Tom Thibodeau type of team. They really felt they were the toughest and they played the best defense. And then I felt like Detroit came and gave New York a dose of its own medicine, and New York did not seem to like that. I don't want to say that they've lost that edge this season because I still think this is a team full of tough guys and they're rugged and they still do a phenomenal job. But I'm not too sure where New York seems to hang its hat on this season. And I think that's been a part of the identity crisis that they're kind of having right now. Whereas Detroit is still a stronger version of itself from last season. They're still playing a lot of defense. They're still rebounding well. And they're struggling to shoot the ball like we always talk about from 3. But outside of that, I mean, they're going to score and they're going to do what they do. So I'm not too fearful of New York right now. And if you had to make me bet right now, if the playoffs started tomorrow, I would have the Pistons defeating the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. But having said that, I think New York is going to pull it together by spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, they're still adapting to a whole bunch of new things. Again, you bring in a new coach, and even if you have most of the same team, it's still going to be kind of a growing process a little bit. So, again, they're going to be keeping a close eye on the Knicks, obviously, as one of the top competitors against the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference this season. Speaking of Detroit, though, let's go over the past week of games for the Pistons. 3 games are on the slate, and luckily for us, the Pistons won all 3 of those games, but a couple of them maybe a little bit too close for comfort, I would say. It all started as they took on, all 3 of these games were at home, by the way. They took on the Phoenix Suns. They won that game 108-105. They needed a pretty big comeback out of the team as they were down 16 at one point in that first half. And it was a pretty rough shooting, not just game, but really a rough couple of games for Cade Cunningham. He went just 3 for 16 in that one, just 10 points, but he did have 11 assists, and those 11 assists were key. Duncan Robinson led all Piston scorers with 19, but the story was really Grayson Allen, who had 33 points against the Detroit Pistons. We've kind of been seeing these wing scorers really be able to take advantage of Detroit and score kind of with some volume a little bit. I mean, is there any worry to that, or is that maybe kind of what the coaching staff is maybe trying to key in on, maybe a wing guy going off, but then kind of, limiting everybody else's production?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to say there's a little bit of concern. I mean, Kawhi gave the Pistons 55, and then Grayson gives 30 plus. I think there is a little bit of concern, especially considering the fact that this team, like we just talked about, has prided itself on defense. But hey, at the end of the day, if an individual performance still results in a loss for the opposing team, I think the Pistons will take it. But having said that, though, I think you do have to focus on containing those guys, because that's what you pride your defense on, particularly when the postseason starts. Like, you want to make sure that you're limiting the opposing team's option A guy, that best guy. You got to try and get the ball out of his hands and make him make tough shots. So the Phoenix game was a little bit concerning, but that's a feisty team.
Yeah,
they're a feisty team. They're scrappy. They get after it. It felt like at some points they had like 7 guys on the floor. They really find ways to overwhelm you, and they're doing a phenomenal job this season. I think a lot of people wrote them off, but they came in and they were really competitive, and that was without Devin Booker on the floor.
Exactly, right. Yeah, no, I think the Suns, obviously, along with the Pistons, probably one of the biggest surprises of the season, just the way that they were able to take all the off-season noise and, people doubting them and being able to turn this in. I mean, they're one of the top teams in the West right now, too, to, again, keep an eye on. We'll see how that continues going forward. The Pistons, though, they kept up their winning ways. They then played host to the Indiana Pacers, who we already talked about are not having a good season so far, and it showed in that game with Detroit winning 121-78. It was a good get-right game, like I said, coming off a game that was a little too close. Cade still struggling, though, in that one, going 6 for 14. Like I said, he's been having kind of a bad streak of scoring. We'll get to that in just a little bit. The Pistons, though, did have 19 turnovers in that game, which is a lot, but it kind of helps out when you're able to force 25 Indiana Pacers turnovers. Honestly, again, it's kind of difficult to hang your hat on or focus too negatively after a win on certain things with the Pistons. But again, I think this shows just how good this team is. This win more so than maybe the Phoenix win or some of the other wins, because this is a team in the Pistons that struggled, and they struggled pretty mightily against a really bad team, and they were still able to win by over 40 points. So I think that tells the tale of just how good Detroit is versus maybe a close nail-biting win over another top team.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is indicative of that. But at the same time, Phil, you want to see your team take care of the ball.
Right.
I know JB Bickerstaff probably was going crazy during that one. But yeah, like you said, though, at the end of the day, finding a way to win handedly, I don't think there's much more that you can say about it. The Pacers are really struggling, and Detroit took advantage.
Right. Last game on their slate, though, of course, was another nail-biting win at home versus the Boston Celtics, 104-103. That was a great game. It ended really a great slate of MLK Day matchups all across the NBA, and it was a really perfect way to end it over on Peacock. Again, but another big Jaylen Brown game. He's had a couple of them against Detroit so far this season. He had 32 in that one, but he did miss that shot at the buzzer that would have handed the Celtics a win. win. Again, hard to be critical after a win, but I want to focus a little bit on Cade now, just with his offensive struggles. He does so much for this team. Again, it could just be part of that, but you got to have to say, if he's shooting well under 50, even well under 40% from the field, that's got to, kind of hang in your hat and kind of be in the back of your mind a little bit.
Yeah, it is concerning. I think the thing that struck me the most is that he's still taking quality shots, and I still feel like a lot of his misses are good ones. You know, he's not missing way off or far left, far right or anything. There have just been a couple of nights where it seems like there's just a bit of a lid on the rim for a couple of quarters. One thing that I did find out, Phil, that I wanted to know to you is Cade's three-point percentages have not been solid this season. He's shooting, I believe, 27%, shooting below 30. I know that, but in October, he was shooting 24%. November, he shot 34%, 35% in December. That number has dropped back off in January, down to 31%. So he was steadily increasing until the start of 2026. And Cade hasn't ever really shot the ball particularly well from three. I believe his career high is 35%, but that's a number that I'd like to see him get back up. But at the same time, Phil, I think he's dealing with now the second-handed attention that comes with being the guy on a top-tier team. I think teams have really focused in on him and have tried to make him a playmaker, which is why his assists have seen an uptick recently. But I think he's done a phenomenal job of making plays, and I think that Boston win was one of the better wins of the season because Cade didn't have an efficient night scoring the ball, but everyone else pitched in and helped out. I believe there were 7 guys or 8 on the roster that scored 7 points or more. And that's what this team is going to need, especially in the playoffs, because you can't bank on Cade going for 30 and 15 every night. That's not conducive to having a long postseason. So at the end of the day, I can't be too mad about it. Cade has bought himself a couple of bad nights. He's been so phenomenal. But, I mean, even when he's not scoring the ball well, his impact is still felt across the board because he still rebounds well. He's still the primary facilitator, and he's doing a phenomenal job defending, in my opinion.
Right. No, definitely. And I think, it really could just be as easy as him just spending a couple of extra, practices with Duncan Robinson. I think if you've got a shooter that good on your team, that could only help your shooting percentage a little bit there.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's something that'll just wear off eventually. But also, too, like we talked about with the Knicks, Cade is probably a bit tired right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that has something to do with it. Fatigue is probably setting in a little bit. But I could see him coming back from the All-Star break clear and ready to go.
Right. All right. Well, we've got a couple of games on the slate for the Pistons upcoming. They're going to be traveling to New Orleans to take on the Pelicans over the next week. They'll also be back at home taking on the Houston Rockets. That's going to be a really good game on Friday. And then they will then play host to the Sacramento Kings. We'll have recaps of these in next week's episode. AJ, any of those 3 games that you've got circled, I have a feeling I know which one you might be picking.
For sure, Phil. Yeah, I'm eyeing the Houston game for sure. I mean, I can't say enough about Ime Udoka. I think he's done a phenomenal job as head coach, and I think enough cannot be said about the job he's done integrating Kevin Durant into this system. The Houston Rockets have forged a really similar identity to the Pistons, I say in some ways, in the fact that they really pride themselves on defense and their length and athleticism and simply just out-grinding teams on a nightly basis. And Kevin Durant, I don't want to say he hasn't fit that mold, but he's a very unique player in his own right. But he's assimilated into this offense with ease, and he's done a phenomenal job this year. Like you said, this is another really talented wing scorer, Phil. So I'm really interested to see how they defend Kevin Durant. And I'm also interested to see what Houston does defensively and how they're able to shake things up against Detroit, because they are a really, really, really good defensive team. So I want to see how Detroit is able to handle their pressure, and I want to see what they can give back in return.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, the big news that we have to spend a little bit of time talking about today happens to also include the Detroit Pistons, and that's the fact that Cade Cunningham was named one of only 10 players to be named to be a starter in the upcoming NBA All-Star game. So big congrats goes out to Cade. I know we talked a little bit last week about, will he get in? And then as soon as we finished putting the episode out there, I learned that they're doing positionless rankings this year. So it didn't matter that he might have fallen behind Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Maxey. You know, he was still able to be named a starter. Want to go over the starters that were named on Monday. In the East, of course, we mentioned Cade Cunningham. He's going to be joined by Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics, Tyrese Maxey of the 76ers, Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks, and Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. On the Western Conference, you've got Luka Doncic, who led all voters in the West with the LA Lakers. The reigning MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, was also named, along with Steph Curry, Victor Wembanyama, and Nikola Jokic. Just very seeing this. I mean, let's talk about Cade just for a second here. Yeah. He's amongst the top guys in all of the NBA. It's got to feel good for him and for Pistons fans to see him get the recognition like that.
Yeah, for sure, man. I don't want to be too sentimental, Phil, but it was pretty surreal to see. Right. You know, just because we've talked about it so much, both on and off air. But as good as the Pistons have been, I think many people in Michigan and around Detroit feel like nobody's paying attention. Right. Nobody's giving the Pistons or Cade the credit that they deserve. And it was really cool to see him be named a starter. And the first starter since Allen Iverson in 2009. That's some pretty elite company to be up there with. So I'm just glad that the Pistons are in that game and well represented in the starting lineup. Yeah,
definitely. Glad to see them at least get one guy in the starting lineup. Question, though, becomes, do we see any other Pistons maybe get their name called, whether it be through injury or through being one of the top coaches' picks? I mean, do we expect any more Pistons to maybe get into the All-Star game this year?
I think so. I mean, I think J.B. Bickerstaff should definitely be named the coach, but also, too, I think Jalen Duren should definitely be in that game, whether it be through injury. I'd like to see him just in the game in general, but, hey, I'm sure he'll take it however he can get it, but he's averaging, like we talked about, I believe, 17 and 10. He's done a phenomenal job this season. He is just as, if not, I don't want to say more. Cade is obviously the focal point of this team, but he's an indisputable piece of this offense and defense. He sets the tone on both ends of the floor, and he's a big part of this team's success every night. So he definitely deserves to be in that game as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and again, one name that wasn't on it that has been causing quite a bit of stir amongst NBA communities is the fact that LeBron James was not named a starter. He has made 21 straight All-Star games. He's going for number 22. AJ, with him not being named a starter, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road. He could still be named one of the reserves. One, the question becomes, do you think he should? And two, I mean, he kind of has earned it, but if he does that, I mean, what does that kind of say about him going forward with this, not just with the Lakers, but really throughout the rest of his career? I mean, he is kind of coming up at the end of it.
Right, yeah. No, as far as does he deserve it, I think he definitely does. I mean, he's still having a phenomenal year, even in limited games. The Lakers are doing well. They're 5th in the West, so I think he deserves to be a part of this game. And I think some people see this as a decline, but LeBron is in a position I think that he's always wanted to be in, which is playing alongside a really great player that he can sort of facilitate around and be himself around. LeBron loves to, I think, run the lane and defend and facilitate and be a playmaker at the highest level. And Luka's in the prime of his career. This is how things are supposed to be. There's not an imbalance between the two of those guys because LeBron isn't as good as he used to be or anything like that. Yes, he's getting older, but he shouldn't have to shoulder such a large load the way he's had to in previous seasons. But having said that, he still very well deserves to be an All-Star like his counterpart, Luka. And I can't imagine there being a world where he doesn't make the All-Star game. I think he's definitely deserving, and I expect to see his name and his jersey in the game.
Well, and he's also, LeBron James. I think just the name alone is going to drive people out there. It's in LA, so even more reason to include that. And I mean, this would make 22 straight All-Star games. I think he might go for 23. Just something about that number I think LeBron really enjoys. But we'll find out on February 1st. That is when the rest of the All-Star reserves are named. We'll see if we hear LeBron's name or any of the other Pistons names called during that. And it'll be broadcasted on Peacock and NBC as well. So very excited about that. We'll be talking about that, of course, when it does happen in just a couple of weeks. But that's going to do it for us on this edition of NB8. AJ, thank you so much for joining us once again. We look forward to another week, not only talking Pistons, but all things NBA related.